one last video for today. We've talked a little bit about the Constitution, we've talked a little bit about federalism, and we've talked a little bit about the Commerce Clause. There are two other powers that I want to hit very quickly for you. And again, the federal government must have a power in the Constitution in order to pass a law. So the commerce power is the one that the United States uses, the federal government uses more than any other. But there are some other potential powers, one of which is the tax and spend power. The tax and spend power, very simply, is this. Think about your own lives. If you had a friend and the friend came up to you and said, hey, I need to borrow 20 bucks. I need to borrow 20 bucks. You want to help your friend out, but you also know that your friend, for whatever reason, smokes a lot of Newport Filter Kings, and you don't really feel like financing the Newport Filter Kings. So when your friend comes up and says, hey, can I borrow 20 bucks? You reach in and you give he or she the $20 with a condition. And your condition is, I'm going to loan you this $20, but you better not buy those Newport Filter Kings with this money. Now you're probably saying, what does this have to do with the tax and spend power? Well, very simply it's this. The United States government has got the power to both tax and spend money. The United States government has the power to both tax and spend money. When you think about it, they are going to collect income taxes and other taxes as well from American citizens and whatnot. But they are also going to provide services. They're going to spend this money to provide services. About 5 or 6 years ago, one of the articles that I used was that the average American household, think about this, the average American household would pay about $20,000 a year in taxes. The average American household would pay about $20,000 a year in taxes. Unfortunately, the average American household would receive $24,000 a year in services. Things like Medicare, things like military, things like Social Security, things like education, things like interest on the federal deficit. So when you put this into context, the tax and spend power should be a very, very significant one. If the average household is spending $20,000 a year in taxes, this isn't to say that everybody is, but the average American household is, and if the average American household is receiving $24,000 worth of services from the United States government, this, in theory, should be larger than the commerce power. Well, I'd mentioned to you, unfortunately before, within the context of $24,000 a year of services per household. What this means is that every year, about 5 or 6 years ago, the United States government was spending about $4,000 more than it received on all of the households in the United States. If you hear the national budget debt, this is where it comes from, or the yearly budget deficit, this is where it comes from. It comes from the idea that the United States government is spending far more money than it is actually collecting in taxes. Now, to get to this actual point, though, the tax and spend power, the United States government every year is going to collect taxes, and then it is going to redistribute monies back to individual citizens, maybe folks that require certain services. It's also going to give money back to the states. Now, the federal government wants the states to spend the money as they see fit. Sometimes the state governments are going to be very much enamored by the idea that they're getting federal monies, but maybe they feel like they could make better decisions within their own state than the federal government could make within their own state. Meaning, if Raleigh is the capital of North Carolina, the state government officials in Raleigh would be able to make better decisions for North Carolina than the federal government officials would in Washington, D.C. There is a degree of truth to this. Let me give you a real-time example, and it's the drinking age. Let me start by asking you a question. Is there a national drinking age? Well, we're probably thinking that it's 21. And you would be correct. The North Carolina drinking age is 21. Let's say that the federal government wanted to establish a drinking age. What's the first thing they've got to do? Well, the first thing they've got to do is they've got to find a power within the Constitution that will allow them to establish this. The power that the United States government used was the tax and spend power, and this is what they did. They knew that they could not automatically establish a 21-year-old drinking age. They knew that they could not establish a 21-year-old drinking age. So they linked the 21-year-old drinking age to highway funds. This is what they said. Every year, states, you are guaranteed X amount of dollars, depending upon the size of the state, the number of people, the miles of roads. Makes sense. It's proportional. What we will do is we will give you not only X, the amount that we're guaranteeing you, but we're going to give you X plus 5% if you make your state drinking age 21 years old. If you do not, you're still going to be guaranteed X amount of money, but if you change your drinking age to 21, we're going to give you X plus 5%. Now, I go back to the question. If you have a friend and you offer to loan them 20 bucks and you tell them not to buy Newport Filter Kings, well, if your friend doesn't buy the Newport Filter Kings, you've placed a condition on that money that you've loaned them, and they followed that condition. Think about it like this. If you loan them 20 bucks and 5 or 10 minutes later you see them with Newport Filter Kings, you're probably not ever going to loan them any money again. The federal government is basically saying we are going to establish conditions on your highway funds just like you establish conditions on loaning 20 bucks to your friend. We have the right under our tax and spend power, if we're going to give you money, to place conditions on how you spend it. Meaning, if you will raise your drinking age to 21, say from 18, which is where it was when I was growing up, for a while anyway, then we're going to give you additional monies. We have the right to place these restrictions on the monies that we give you, and if you follow our restrictions, then we have the right to give you more money. States, on the other hand, and South Dakota was the state in question, said, no, you can't do this. The state said, at best, this is a bribe. You are trying to bribe us to do what you want to do. At worst, this is blackmail. You're basically telling us you're going to give us money if we do something that you want, and we're not going to give you money, highway funds, additional highway funds, if we don't do what you want. Well, the Supreme Court took a look at this. And again, think about this in your context. Would you continue to loan a friend money if they paid it back, if they didn't follow the conditions that you gave them, meaning they bought the Newport Filter Kings, or would you stop, not give them additional money if they didn't follow your conditions? Well, if it was me, I would probably be inclined to not loan them the money. And what did the Supreme Court hold? The Supreme Court held that it was perfectly legal for the United States government to do this. Is there a national drinking age? No. Is the drinking age in many states 21? Absolutely. Why? Because they accepted the terms of the funding. So basically the state said, we want 5% extra money. We will accept your terms. So the federal government ever since then, since states have established a 21-year-old drinking age, have given states X dollars for their normal funds for the highways, and then X plus 5% if they change their drinking age. If you were a state that did not change your drinking age, you did not receive any less money. You still were guaranteed your X dollars, but you weren't given any additionals. The Supreme Court basically said this was not a blackmail situation. They said that the federal government was giving states the legitimate opportunity to choose if they wanted the money and indeed how they would spend it, what kind of policies they would set. They said in this instance, if you're giving them X or the opportunity to have X plus 5, they've got a choice. They said it would be blackmail if you said you'll get X amount of dollars if you raise your drinking age, but it will be X minus 5% if you don't. In that instance, they were not really giving them a choice, but they were punishing them if the states made a decision about their drinking age that was contrary to what the federal government wanted. So is there a national drinking age today? No, there still isn't. But is the drinking age in most places 21? Yes, it is. But these are state laws conditioned to the idea of getting additional highway funds.